mean, I want to start with just what you said about almost feeling guilty, like you don't care. And of course, yes, like caring less is literally a part of burnout, but it is a myth that if you love your job enough, if you're really engaged and passionate, then you won't burn out. And that is a big, big, big myth. It doesn't mean that they're immune to it. And sometimes it can actually increase the likelihood.
Lydia, I'm so excited to have you on. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, well, you and I had a conversation just a couple minutes ago, and there's so many, you know, um, parts of burnout all around from you mentioned prevention, you mentioned buffering, you mentioned rest and relaxation. And then there's so much that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much underneath, right? So I guess if you were to give us just a like 60-second to 2-minute introduction to burnout as a burnout expert yourself, like how would you introduce us to the concept?
Ooh, okay. So burnout, it has a big three, right? The big three trifecta, which is lack of energy, extreme exhaustion, lack of confidence, which is something a lot of people don't know. It's not a side effect, it's actually part of what burnout is. And then also cynicism and detachment. So I like to think about those three things because so often I think we just think about feeling overwhelmed with too much to do and not enough time to do it. And while that's certainly one type of burnout, there are different types of burnout, but they all come with those three things: lack of confidence, exhaustion, and cynicism. So that's probably my
Mm.
super quick overview.
Well, yeah, I mean, even in that quick overview, I'm like, oh, interesting. You mentioned lack of confidence is not so much a symptom of it, if not part of burnout. And so, just to, I guess, place a little bit of context around this, we're going to start this conversation really focusing around the job search because, if you're listening and you're here with your cup of coffee and hanging out with us, like, the job search is interesting nowadays. It's really taking a shift, and what used to work no longer works. And so, if what you're doing is submitting applications and that is your job search, you're going to find yourself, searching for 9 months, a year. I met someone who was searching for 4 years, right? Now they lacked a strategy, which explains the 4 years, but to be able to then turn around and get hired in 4 months, that's a very big difference once you're working with a coach, once you have that system in place. But nevertheless, there are people, who have been in the search, right? Maybe you're one of them and you're listening and you're like, man, I've been in the search for a long time. I'm getting kind of burnt out, right? Let's talk about that today. We're going to first talk a little bit about common signs of burnout and how do you know where along the spectrum you are? Are you in crisis mode? Like it's really important for you to understand if you are or are leaning toward crisis mode. So why don't we start there, Lydia? What are the most common signs of burnout, especially if as you start getting into that threshold?
Yeah. So a lot of the signs align with those three kind of pillars of what burnout is. So going down the exhaustion pillar, it will be things like, I have clients talking about how they feel like they're running on fumes or they have nothing left in the tank or they're just so tired that they have nothing else to give. So after work or maybe after your job search, you just, curl up in a ball and hide under a blanket and watch TV with a glass of wine. So that's one that I think is a really big red flag. Another is again that lack of confidence, just feeling like your work isn't cutting it anymore, like you can't keep up with what you used to be able to do, maybe that everyone else is doing it better than you. Often imposter syndrome starts to show up, to feeling like you've almost snuck in and somebody's going to figure out that you don't belong here or you're not qualified. And then that cynicism and detachment. So if you have a job that requires you to be really empathetic, perhaps you're finding that you don't have it in you to care as much as you used to. You're feeling detached from the outcomes. You don't really you're not as invested or you don't care as much about what happens as a result of your effort. I think those are some of the big kind of telltale signs, but then there are all sorts of other symptoms that come like difficulty sleeping or sometimes physical illness, right? Having more headaches or migraines or body pains. Those can all come with extreme burnout too.
Mm. I can almost see our friend on the other side of this microphone kind of going through the checklist and being like, okay, 3 out of 5. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So you also mentioned there's different types of burnout. So as we're in this assessment phase, right? What are the different types of burnout?
Yeah. So a quick note is that burnout is officially characterized as a work-related phenomenon, even though I think that common vernacular talks about burnout in other spheres, like caregiving burnout or motherhood burnout or relationship burnout. But I'm going to stick to kind of the work-related one for this talk. So at work, we've discovered at least four different types of burnout. There's overload burnout, which is what you probably think burnout is, right? Too much to do and not enough time to do it. Working overtime, really demanding pace of work, too much, just too much. But there's one that's almost the opposite, and it's actually under challenge burnout. And it's when your job feels boring, uninteresting, or unchallenging. In some ways, you almost want more to do or more interesting things to do. Your skills aren't being utilized. Then there's neglect burnout, which is where you feel really unsupported and almost abandoned at work. Maybe you didn't have a supportive manager. Maybe you didn't have proper training. Maybe you don't have the resources you need to do your job. And then last, there's lack of purpose burnout, which is when it feels like your role is no longer meaningful, important, or aligned with what you really care about. And another important note is to note that you can have multiple ones of these. Often my clients are checking like 2 or 3 out of 4. So you can experience multiple ones in different phases or different parts of your job.
Wow. I almost can imagine when you're experiencing, like, there's a huge, you're being overworked, right? But then in work that is not challenging enough. So I guess now that we have an idea of a quick self-assessment on burnout and the types of burnout that we could be experiencing, if we're experiencing burnout, if we've checked the boxes, right? How is this impacting our confidence and our motivation? Because I feel like a lot of times, I hear people sort of feeling guilty for it
Mhm.
when it might be less, I don't care, and more a symptom of something that's going on, like burnout. So, how does burnout impact confidence and motivation?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I mean, I want to start with just what you said about almost feeling guilty, like you don't care. And of course, yes, like caring less is literally a part of burnout. But it is a myth that if you love your job enough, if you're really engaged and passionate, then you won't burn out. And that is a big, big, big myth. If anything, sometimes, well, yes, like highly engaged employees are less at risk of burnout. It doesn't mean that they're immune to it. And sometimes it can actually increase the likelihood, right? Because if you love your job, you're going to work overtime and work really hard, and then it becomes this bad cycle. So one, I just want to kind of dispel that. If you're experiencing burnout, it doesn't mean that you don't like your job, you're not passionate, or you don't want to be a good, motivated employee. It just means that there's something, often a dual effect of the environment plus you, the person in it, that's not working. Um, but big emphasis on the environment. So often there are a lot of external factors, whether that's in your personal life or in your job, that are increasing the stress. And I like to ask clients this question of like, if you swapped yourself out with just a random person, do you think they would also struggle? And if so,
Mm.
it's not just a you problem, right? There's some external issues here that I think most people would struggle with. But I've gotten a little sidetracked, so I want to loop back because you talked about confidence and motivation. I hope that all of that helps with confidence a little bit, right? Because I think so often we can almost feel a sense of shame if we're experiencing burnout. And I just want to emphasize like, this is not like, yes, part of it is always about us because we are the person in the room, but it's not just about you. There's so much more going on in the job, in the organization, even the societal level. It's not just the you problem. Having motivation, like, yeah, it makes total sense that you're experiencing a lack of motivation. That's not some moral failing. It's not like you're quote unquote lazy, which is a word I think we should just banish. Unless we're excited and like positively embracing it, I guess. You're depleted, right? You're doing too much with not enough resources or support. You don't have a lack of motivation. It's just that it's being spent more than you can recover
Mm.
it.
Oh, this is great. This is great. And you started talking about internal and external, right? So you mentioned shame in the sense of like sometimes we expect ourselves to be robots, and I think that shame comes in when it's like, "Oh, you're not a robot." And I'm like, "Well, that's actually just human nature." And we can have compassion for ourselves for our own human nature. But then the internal and external is really interesting. I would love to know. I've heard some things, and so I imagine if I'm thinking it, someone else, that's here, sitting here having their coffee with us, is thinking it as well. And so My question to you is internal and external factors, right? What are some of those internal factors? And I'll just tell you kind of my thoughts. I feel like sometimes there is maybe lack of self efficacy, or if I have that imposter syndrome, or if I had trauma in my childhood or something, some things can happen that make us lean towards striving or lean towards some of these pieces. How can we differentiate like, okay, this is mostly external versus this is internal and I might need either a coach, or this is like emotionally internal where we would need a therapist to work through some things before I can actually tackle the external piece?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A few thoughts there. One would be the question of, is this the first time you're experiencing burnout, or has burnout followed you from job to job? If it constantly appears, if it's your ever-present not friend, then that is a sign that it might be time to look internally at some of the variables that we all have within us that can make us more burnout prone. So that's one. Two, I would say there are some kind of big, very common personality or behavior traits that can lead to burnout. Things like perfectionism and people pleasing and extremely high drive, like kind of almost overachievement, right?
Are you
Those
telling
can
me
lead.
type A folks tend to be maybe a little bit more susceptible?
What? Yes. If you self-identify as a high-achieving, self-starting go-getter, then you might be a risk friend.
Interesting. Because a
Yeah.
lot of people think I was, talking with someone. Actually, I talked with multiple people, and this comes up a lot. Well, I've been told that my 100% is somebody else's 110. And immediately in my mind, I'm like, is that a standard that you want to maintain? Right. Because it is difficult. And some people are just naturally like, it's no sweat off their back. You know what I mean? Like it's very simple and that's fine. Um, have you heard from your clients, folks that maybe I'm getting older, okay? So I'm just gonna be the person to say it. You, me, and our friend is sitting here with coffee with us, and I'm just gonna be the one to be like, look, I'm getting older. I remember in my 20s, like I could work 3 jobs, go to grad school, have an internship, and do all the things, right? And I actually got to a point where I was in my doctor's office in tears because my doctor's like, you've run your body too hard. And you did it
Mhm.
because you could, not because you should. And it came out of, for me, it came out of striving and all these things, right? But she was like, you have to do something different. She was because your body is shutting down. Like your body is telling you you cannot run at this pace. And so I've had to really slow down and address a lot of these factors. And so I'm curious, what your thoughts are and if you've experienced this in people where at one point they were really high achievers and having to kind of come to terms with the fact that, you can't go at 110 forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good question. And honestly, what's coming to mind is the fact that a lot of the people I work with are women who have, I like to say they're juggling big careers with little kids. And often they come to me when their kids are two, three, four, because suddenly what used to work isn't working anymore. And they're like, I don't know how I used to do this, but I can't do this anymore. Something has to change. And I thought of that when you were talking because I think that the reality is that many of us are ever adding to our list of responsibilities. Yeah, even if you don't, have kids, like maybe you do have kids, but you got pets, you have a house, you have a spouse, like maybe you have aging parents,
Hmm.
you just honestly have more responsibilities as you grow older. And a key part of burnout prevention is called resource recovery. Like you spend your resources, your time, your energy, your mental bandwidth, and you need to recoup them. And back when you were, a little youngster running around with your 3 jobs in college, like, yeah, you were working hard, but on the weekend when you didn't work, like, maybe you really could just lay in bed for a whole day and watch TV, and that is not something I have done in a really long time. Yeah.
Oh, so what I remember is, oh, I used to be able to work 3 jobs and do all the million things. What I don't selective memory, right? What I don't conveniently remember are the Saturdays that you're right. I would wake up and just like lounge around without a stress in the world because I wasn't at work and my homework was done and blah, 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 right? That's interesting that we don't have our lives are a lot more full as we get older. That's so true. Okay. So we're going to take a little bit of a turn because you and I had a conversation before we started recording, just to kind of see where, where this conversation would take us. And one of the things you mentioned that is so interesting to me is, okay, we've now assessed burnout is a thing. There's a continuum, and if you're listening, you're probably like, I'm kind of like right around middle, maybe past middle on the continuum. And you've also assessed the type of burnout and maybe even part of the reason why you may have been like, oh, light bulb. I am also that type A personality. You and I are sisters, right? We're very much the same type A or whatever, right? But so now I know that you also talked about something really cool. You talked about making the current job better and job crafting, which sounds really cool. So I'd love for you to kind of introduce that to us.
Yeah. Yeah, so honestly, the idea here is I kind of flip the way we think about our jobs on its head. Like so many of us, we get a job description, we get hired, and we're like, okay, this is the law of the land. They said I have to do this, right? But the reality is that research shows we actually have significantly more influence and autonomy over our jobs than we think. And this is true even in lower level jobs where you have to follow really strict standards because there are different things you can craft, you can change, you can cut, copy, paste, right? Some of us have the autonomy to do that with our tasks, what we're actually focused on. Sometimes that requires buy-in from other parties or some influencing and strategy. Sometimes you can just do it. But even if you can't change your tasks, if you're like, Lydia, don't tell me that. I have like 100 things I have to do and I literally can't change them. You can change other things, like the way you go about those tasks, or the mindset you have when you go about those tasks, or the mindset you
Mm.
have about your whole job, or the people you interact with and the way you interact with them at work. So there are all kinds of different facets we can look at. I almost like to think of like a mixer board, like what can we pull up the dial on? What can we turn the dial down?
Mm. What are some of those examples, that maybe myself, or if you're listening, you probably also thinking like, give me some examples. What can I test out? What can I try out? And then maybe they can try it out, right? And then they can reach out to you on LinkedIn and be like, this worked, or this one didn't work for me. Give me another one, right?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, I'll start with one that is like anybody can do this, right? And it is to think about the bigger meaning and purpose behind your role. And one example I love from the research is the example of a hospital janitor, right? A job that's pretty set in stone. Like if the janitor decides they want to start giving patients IVs, there's going to be a problem. But the research shows that if we look at different janitors, some of them view their job as a calling with a bigger sense of purpose and meaning, and some of them view it as just a job. And the
Mm,
people who viewed it as a calling with a bigger sense of purpose and meaning had created a bigger why. So maybe they didn't think of themselves as a janitor, they thought of themselves as the patient cheerleader because they get to walk around and interact and chit chat with patients who are alone and struggling in a way that doctors and nurses don't have time to do. And so that mental reframe of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Yes, you need a paycheck, but what's the bigger purpose and why? Maybe a different way to think about that is like, what's the most positive story you could tell your toddler about what you do? I'm a burnout coach, and I tell my 2.5-year-old son that mommy makes people happy.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's an example, but you can also get a lot more kind of practical and tangible. So, for example, making a list of everything, all your tasks, I've been trying to think a little bit more strategically, almost think about your role, like hopefully your boss or your boss's boss is thinking about your role and say, what is the number one greatest impact I could have in this role? What's the bigger purpose, the ultimate goal? And
Mm,
then which tasks are most aligned with that and which ones aren't? And for the ones that aren't, how might I reduce the time, energy, and attention I spend on those? So it's helpful to think about
yeah.
it from the organizational value. It's also helpful to think about for your energy. Like, which of these do I love and which do I hate? Because somewhere in your team or company, there might be someone who is the opposite, and maybe you can swap.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, so you've given us a good amount of interesting ways to like reframe, to rethink, and to rebalance the emotional, I guess, charge of the work that we do, and then also rebalance the work itself, both by looking at what energizes us, what's on our plate, what can be taken off our plate, And there's so many little things. And one thing that I've really loved, just so you know, Lydia, one thing I've really loved is inviting the community to like reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's been the most rewarding thing to hear from folks. And so if you're listening right now, I absolutely invite you to reach out to Lydia and to let her know how it went with any one of these tasks or with just anything that resonated with you, because it's been really rewarding. And I hope that you reach out to Lydia as well.
I would love that.
Okay, so we're chit-chatting, we're here, we all have our tea, we all have our coffee. You shared a couple of ways to make the current job better. But the other piece is it's not always the job. Sometimes we think the job is burning me out. But like you said, we don't realize what I didn't realize when I was younger that, oh, well, yeah, but on my weekends I didn't do anything. I think the same thing can be true here, right? Where I'm like, why am I getting burnt out? It's my work, it's my work, it's my work. But then I realize every minute of every day, I've got something calling my attention outside of work. So, can you tell us about this holistic approach that you mentioned?
Oh, yes. So when I work with people, I like to look at least four different things. One is the job, the work context, what's going well, what's not. I like to think about your personal life. Again, kind of what's going well, what's a resource, it's called, that's adding to your energy and your motivation, and what are demands that are depleting it. I like to think about your non-work roles. So, like, I'm a mom. Are you a mother juggling a lot of different responsibilities? Are you caring for aging parents, right? What are those non-work roles that are adding to your resources or depleting them? And then also your long-term goals, right? How is this all aligned with where you want to go and what really matters for you? I have found, honestly, by surprise, I didn't expect to find this, but I am a holistic career coach and I really specialize in working with women and working moms because I've discovered that my clients are not just burnt out at work, they're burnt out everywhere. And so it's a little asinine to just take a mono focused approach. Like you got to look at the whole picture. Otherwise, you're like patching up a leak in one area and it's just going to spill out the other side.
Oh, that's so important. And I hear that all the time where it's like, oh, my work, my work, my work. But then we get into like the daily habits and the recharging. And even though your children can be such a positive part of your life, when you're already deep into burnout, even positive energy can continue to burn you out. And
Hmm.
you need true. Well, I was just talking to someone, I was like, I feel like you need true rest. Like, I mean, throw your phone in a treasure box, leave it there for the weekend, go out camping and just be in silence for a weekend. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, which actually leads me, I want to talk about mental detachment a little bit. But before we get into that, if you're listening, you might be like, okay, there might be four of us here at this table, right? Maybe you're the person who thinks, hey, I'm in my job, I'm getting burnt out, and I need to know what to do in order to stop the burnout and or decide if it's time to move into a job search. But you also might be the other person at the table and you might be thinking, I'm in a job search and this job search is so exhausting. It's so mentally draining. It puts me in such a negative mood because of again, ghosting, the rejection, like all that happens with you having to put yourself out there and then not hear anything back. And so, along with that, regardless which one of us you are at the table, one of the things that you mentioned was mental detachment, and it just really caught my eye. So, can you share a little bit about like mental detachment and the benefit and the how to, whether you're job searching and just sick of it, or if you're at your job and it's just really taking a toll on you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I like to think about work-life boundaries. And when I coach people, we talk about at least five different types of boundaries. But in all honesty, the mental, the cognitive detachment is the most important. But it's also like the last frontier. It's the hardest to conquer. A lot of us don't even know it's something we need to conquer. But here is why. So most of the people I work with, when they're experiencing burnout, they're not actually working 8-hour work weeks. It's like they're working 40 to 50, like maybe 45, what is very kind of average for the typical American. But they are constantly thinking about work. Like 95% of their thoughts when they're not in front of their desk is about work. They're writing emails in the shower, they're prepping for meetings as they're falling asleep, which you are doing what you are thinking about. So if you are thinking about work, then you are working. So they are working all the time. So mental detachment or mental boundaries is really the practice of becoming more intentional and aware of where our thoughts are going and trying to learn new techniques to have more control over that, right? Like
Mm.
cognitive behavioral coaching and therapy and mindfulness are both really well proven practices that show that we can have more control of our thought patterns and minds than most of us realize or have ever tried to be.
Mm. That sounds really powerful. And because I come from, not therapy, but the counseling world, right? In the coaching world, obviously, but I know that a tip you hear on a podcast is not going to do it. Like this takes time, right? Human behavior takes time and takes depth and takes intentionality and takes the expertise and that feedback. But if you were to give a couple of snippets of like, what are some exercises that people can do to at least be introduced to it, and then they can reach out to you for something a little deeper. Excuse my voice, my goodness.
That's okay. Yeah. So, okay, two quick tips. One is called labeling. This comes from mindfulness practice, and it is the idea of starting to train your brain to notice when you are thinking about work. So you're in the kitchen cooking dinner, and all of a sudden you're thinking about work. Label that as working, and then ask yourself, do I want to be working right now? I like to ask, would I stop what I'm doing and go sit at my desk to write this email? If the answer is no, then trying to mindfully come back to the present moment. It's really helpful to re-engage your senses because your body's always in the present moment. So just really pay attention to chopping that onion. You should be anyways, so you don't cut your finger. So that's first tip. Second tip, it can be helpful to actually designate a time and a place for you to think about work or think about your job search. Sometimes in different spaces, this is called worry time, like scheduled worry time or worry postponement. And I like to pair that with a physical place. So you can't see my video, but behind me there is a blue chair that I try really hard to never sit in because that's my worry chair, right? It's like if you want to go think about work or worry about your job search, you can, but it's going to be on Monday at 6 p.m. and you're going to go sit in that chair, that one chair. This eventually becomes a mental thought pattern too. So now when I start to worry about something, my brain goes blue chair. I'm like, nope, no, I want to come back to the present moment. I don't want to go sit in that blue chair.
Okay, that is really interesting. A lot of this, goes back to um, discipline, right? And
Hmm.
this impacts whether we're talking about burnout or we're talking about habits or whether you want to lose weight or get a promotion, right? It's there's a time and a place for everything, and keeping things in their time and place versus keeping it when we feel like or when we just naturally flow into that can make a huge difference. And scheduling worry, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know that I was aware of my ability to control when I schedule worry. I don't think I thought about it, right? And so this is really, really neat. So, number one, labeling, and number two, designate a time and a place to think about work and or worry about work, and then have a start and stopping time for it. I love that. Okay.
Hmm.
So, we've learned quite a bit about burnout today. As we start to kind of wind down, what are some pieces that you would feel remiss not sharing before we wrap up? Something that, we're all here at the table, we're all having our coffee. This is really helpful for people and people are going to want to reach out to you to learn more. What's important that you share before we leave?
Ooh, so many thoughts going through my head. But I think one is this idea of, I've talked some about this idea of demands versus resources, right? Almost think of this like balance spreadsheet. The reality is that we face stressors every day. All of us do, whether it's at work or home. So our resources are being drained. So I like to really encourage people to think about, well, every single day, then you need time for resource recovery and stress relief and relaxation every single day. So start to just think about that balance spreadsheet. Am I draining or adding right now? And if I'm draining, how can I add?
Okay, that is a great way of looking at it. Do you suggest things like time tracking?
What a good question. I think time tracking can be helpful. I actually probably more often recommend tracking other things though. Like for instance, often I give clients the homework of like track how many times you check your email in a day. Yeah, you have a guilty look on your face.
Guilty.
Uh-huh. Or track how often you think about work outside of work. Or track your excitement and energy and motivation for the different tasks that you're working on throughout the day. And notice what you hate and what you love. So time tracking can be helpful, but I think for most of it, time is like the easiest boundary, right?
Mhm.
The other things are harder. Yeah.
Oh, this is great because so often we hear track your time and time block and, all these pieces that are really around productivity, not
Uh-huh.
wellness and avoiding burnout. And so you're saying don't track the time. Now that I say it, I'm like, well, this might actually lead to more burnout, having to track your time. And so you're saying track more it's almost like becoming, well, it is, right? Becoming more aware of the triggers that lead to burnout, the checking the email, the constantly being on and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah, it's tracking. I mean, time, there are lots of resources. Time is one, but so is energy and so is attention. Yeah. So thinking kind of holistically and yes, I mean, I'm not a productivity coach. If anything, my advice is like, yes, you are right. You are trying to do too much and not enough time. So stop trying to do it faster. You're like, we're gonna do something different.
Yes. And that's really insightful, because I think sometimes when we think about burnout and I could be wrong on this, please do correct me. I know this is, your space of expertise, but like I feel like as someone who can be prone to burnout if I don't watch myself, like I can look at burnout prevention and productivity sort of in the same bucket. Like, how can I be more productive in less time? And therefore, I will burn out less, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's end with that. Like, respond to my thought process there. And I know that I'm not the only one. So, respond to those of us who have that thought process.
Oh, yeah, 100% not accurate for so many reasons. One, remember, like, we're not just talking about time, we're talking about energy. And working at 150% productivity is not sustainable. It is draining your energy. But yeah, I mean, I like to think a lot about things like toxic hostile culture. It's like we have been told that if you can't keep up, it's a you problem, it's your fault, and you should just do it better, faster. But that's just trying to be more perfect. Does that sound restorative? So yeah, you won't hear me talk much about time management in any of my stuff. I do talk about focus management. I talk about energy management, but I'm not your like productivity hack girl. I'm here to help you figure out what really matters and focus your time and energy on that, and then get really good at saying no to a lot of other things.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that leads to better quality work, which I think is a lot of the tension is, people are like, "Oh, I want to do more work." And it's like, "Well, what if you did less but at a better quality and you also along the way just felt better, like you were just healthier?" I think it's putting the priority where the priority should be. And we've lost sight of that. And we're like, productivity or even money is more important than people. And I think society has kind of framed it that way. And it's hard you have to literally go against the current in order to undo that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Well, gosh, it has been a breath of fresh air to sit here and chat with you and learn about burnout and not only like prevention, but also, like you said, the buffering and can we start our journey back to a place that's well rested and that is at human capacity, right? Not at machine capacity. So tell us, I know that this is just the beginning of our conversation for many of us listening. And so can you tell us where we can reach out to you, how we can get started if we're interested in learning more?
Yeah, definitely. So my business is Thrive Culture Coaching. I'd love to see you on my website, or on LinkedIn. Yeah, and like I mentioned, so I really specialize in helping, especially female leaders, many of whom have kids, but not all, thrive more in their career. Often that looks like giving it a shot at making your current job work better for you, but sometimes it looks like helping you choose a better option for your next step. So if that sounds like you, I'd love to learn more about your story.
Awesome. Beautiful. I love that. And don't forget, if you tried any one of the, tips that she mentioned today, or even better, if you're starting to think about some of the questions that we talked about, I do encourage you to reach out to her because she's always sharing really great information and being able to share some information that's specific to you is going to be really, really helpful. Well, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today. We talked about a topic that can be pretty serious, but I love just the care with which you brought Lydia. So thank you for that. And if you're listening, as always, know that we love you. We're cheering you on. We're praying for you, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please tap the 5-star review on the show's homepage in your podcast app. It would absolutely make my day, and it helps others discover the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, to download your free career resources and learn how I help seasoned professionals land amazing offers in as little as 90 days, click on the link in the description or go to theuncommoncareer.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.